really happy to have Yuki here with us. So I'll just do a very quick introduction of IntegriCulture and Yuki. First of all, congratulations on reaching so many milestones recently. IntegriCulture has been in the news a lot recently. I believe you're now the highest funded cell-like startup in Asia with your latest Series A round, and you're starting some really exciting partnerships with Nipple Ham and Chia Meats. So we'll talk all about that. So first of all, just to manage everyone's expectation, I think Yuki is probably one of, if not the person who has thought about cultivated meat more than anyone that I have met. So we can easily sit here for 5 hours and like talk about cultivated meat the whole time. So also, Yuki speaks very fast. And
well, I will try to be careful on that.
His mind goes very fast as well. Every time I speak with you, like it's a little bit hard to keep up, which is a good thing. Like completely blowing my mind every time. So today we're gonna go through a lot of stuff with Yuki. Hopefully touch on a lot of things that I think should be shared more about the whole IntegriCulture story. It's not going to be a presentation, but we will incorporate a lot of slides during this chat, just because I think there are so many things to talk about. So we want to kind of keep ourselves, focused on a few things. So without further ado, I'm going to share my screen now. I want to start off with just bringing everyone together into this vision that Yuki has, and what better way than to show it with manga. So everyone is seeing this now, right? So you can double click, like I really recommend you to double click on that and maximize that screen for you. So here we go. We're crossing from real people to manga. This is Yuki here. After this slide, I'm gonna pass it on to Yuki to tell us the story of your cultivated meat journey, your vision through manga. Okay, here we go.
Yeah, so this is the photo from the incorporation of IntegriCulture company that happens in October 2015. And yeah, okay. So by the time the Shoji Meat project was about like 15 people, and that's where the company was born. And this is one of the computer graphics representation of what cell cultured meat factory might look like in the future. And so these are basically 200 to 300 ton scale bioreactors in a row. And that's basically the culturing muscle or whatever cells in there.
So to get context of this, so this big of a bioreactor and the production volume would be like how much, like tons of meat products would we be getting from this size of a bioreactor?
Yeah, so that would depend on obviously the cell density and also the speed of cell proliferation, and also the mode of operation of these bioreactors. It could be like batch operation, or it could be fed batch operation. So it could happen. There are these multiple options for the mode of operation for different types of cells. So I imagined this after a typical beer brewery.
Yeah, like a beer brewery. Yeah, that's a really good way to see it. Okay, I'll move to the next slide.
Yeah. So yeah, the next slide. Then, but what we actually want is steak, not just slurry of cells. So we've been thinking about how we get the steak and tissue engineering done, and as we contemplate about how steak brewery might look like, I sort of landed on this design, which is like an aseptic bag, which is already sort of used for biopharma medical research cell culture in disposable bags. And in this picture, basically the tissue engineering and tissue culture is done inside the bag, and as cells fill up the bag, it organizes itself into full muscle tissue, and as it fills up the bag, and then that's the time for the shipment.
Great. It's just really nice to like see it like visualize, right? So what about this next one?
you have to think in a total system. And as you think about the total system, there are the used culture medium, and there must be use for that, especially in situations where we do this system, where we run this system in space, because this picture actually takes place on Mars. It says 3 Huygens Food Center, and Huygens crater is a actual crater on Mars. And if you have to do that, do cell culture in that sort of environment, you have to have some sort of near 100% recycling system. So I imagined about combining cell culture with hydroponics. And that's what's happening in here. So it's basically the media recycle system running in parallel.
Awesome. Let me move to the next one. Whoa.
And yeah, that's for seafood, seafood culture. And what we know is that if you are to do cell culture for shrimp or fish, the temperature for cell culture is actually 25 degrees or like 28 degrees, or more or less closer to room temperature compared to chicken or beef, which tends to happen in 38, 39 degrees. And I thought about, so if we are to have a big bioreactor at a temperature of 25 or so, why not just dip the whole thing in the ocean? And that will be, from engineering point of view, could be easier. Well, I'm not saying it will be easier. I'm not an expert on that. But then I imagine it could happen better in that way. So design this floating seafood cell culture facility with some media recycle system based on microalgae. And this microalgae on ocean surface has already been researched by NASA in a project called Omega Project. And it's also an option that's sought after by other space agencies as well.
Awesome. I just love this picture. I'm just like picking the pictures that I like most. Okay. And this one.
Yeah. Then we also thought about, I'm saying we and us, because it's not just me who thought about all these things. It's actually more like a collaborative effort of people gathered around the Shojin Meat project. And then there was one concern of, so if we are to produce millions of tons of cell-based meat in the future, how much culture medium would you need, and how much what's the amount of culture medium ingredients you would need? So because then we will be talking about millions of tons of amino acids and sugar, and especially for countries like Japan and Singapore, they one of the possibilities that one of the hopes they're finding in cell-based meat is the food security, so that they don't have to import. But if you are importing millions of tons of sugar and amino acid instead of meat, like there's not much difference there in terms of food security. Then we thought about, so we could use the ocean surface to cultivate microalgae or some sort of plant species, or probably microalgae because it's more efficient, and process that microalgae into culture medium. Then we can actually solve that ultimate resource problem.
Yeah. So yeah, we'll talk more about it in this section about cost and scaling up, which is like what Yuki has thought about a lot. So we'll end with 2 pictures on Mars. What is this?
Yeah, so that's cell culture meat facility on Mars. So you see this green bit, that's the microalgae production pool, and that's where culture medium is being produced using, although thin, the Martian atmosphere rich with CO2, and there's a solar panel as the power source, and it's producing meat as well as probably some vegetables as well as a part of the media recycling system.
And the last one we have, woo!
Yeah, so that's basically a nuclear-powered meat, cell-based meat production facility on Pluto. Because then I thought about, so if we are doing it on Mars, which is kind of a lucky CO2 atmosphere and some sunlight, but what about in further out in the space where even sunlight is not very viable? Then I thought about, well, Pluto has got all the carbon and nitrogen and oxygen elements as in the form of frozen crust. And that frozen crust is also a huge 0 Kelvin heat sink, which would basically boost up the energy efficiency of nuclear power. Because the energy efficiency of nuclear power is about like 30-something% on Earth, because the heat sink is only like 300 Kelvin. But if you have to do that on Pluto, you can go much higher. Then I thought about, why not power the whole thing with nuclear power using, say, something like liquid nitrogen turbine or something.
Wow. So
then came up with this design.
Yeah, this is like how to do it even without solar power, right?
Yeah, and also what's being produced here is not just meat or like or vegetables. It's more like production of organic mass, not just meat or vegetable.
Awesome. So we just took the audience all the way to Mars. So I'm gonna like bring us back and ground us back to talk about the regulatory landscape, like completely ground back to reality again. So I want to like ask Yuki this, because I get asked this a lot about the regulatory issues around cultivated meat. And well, from what we've talked about before, Yuki, well, first of all, like Asia, my personal bet is that the first product launch is actually going to happen in Asia, either in Singapore or Japan. But Yuki, you've been telling me that in fact in Japan, cultivated meat, like if you want to bring your product to market today, that is actually possible. Can you explain a bit more about that to the audience?
Yeah. So first of all, while many countries see cell cultured meat as some sort of novel food, in Japan, the decision by the regulator is not to see that as any novel food. So it's basically so they are simply using the status quo, or the regulatory status quo, as the starting point for discussion, and let companies launch the cellular agriculture products. And if there's something, then that's our time regulator is going to act. But by that time it happens, and the Japanese regulators will probably look at how FDA is doing and what EU is doing.
So you actually, we've talked about this in more details before. Actually, you have actually consulted the Japanese regulators, and they're saying that currently the cultivated meat actually falls within the existing pickled meat category under the
yeah, more strictly speaking, it's a half-cooked food product category, such as pickled meat.
Oh, okay. All right. And you speaking with the regulator about this.
Yeah, so the regulator is actually the local health office, and that basically gives out the go or no go for any production food product facility. And yeah.
Can you explain a bit more about, like, so it is not just any kind of cultivated meat. There are also two very important criteria that you actually, the system that you created actually, which makes it easier under the Japanese regulations.
Yeah. So there are actually 3 points to look at. One is the ingredient, and second is the if it contains any GMO, and number 3 is the HACCP regulations. And for the GMO stuff, some companies that are known to use like cell lines, if the gene is edited or some kind of genetic engineering is done, it could fall into a genetically engineered food category, and because genetically altered materials used as the ingredient. And number 2 is but for that, as long as a company is using primary cells or like cells taken from animals, and as it is, it's basically seen. It's from a regulatory point of view, it is basically a tiny piece of meat, and it's not a GMO.
And it falls under the GMO category.
If you are using like cell, it could fall under GMO if you are using cell line.
And that would just make the process a lot longer and more difficult.
Yeah, because it has to go through the GMO approval.
Okay. And
yeah.
Ingredients, like the medium that you use, that is very unique.
Yeah, and for the ingredient, as long as you, there are things what you can use is the food with history of consumption and also approved food additives. And in terms of this ingredient, some companies are trying to use some sort of externally added growth factors. And at the moment, growth factors are not on the list of approved substances. So if you are to use growth factors, you have to go through this whole approval process for novel food additives.
So the key is whether you have externally added growth factors, right?
Yeah, at least for the case of Japan, yeah.
Then you need it's a completely different route of approval. If you don't have that, then again it goes back to like it actually falls under the current law, and there's no special approval or additional approval required. How did you achieve not having to externally add any growth medium?
Yeah, so that's basically where our technology did better in that sense, because the technology originally developed in Shojin Meat project by that scaled and automated IntegriCulture company, and it's the CowNet system. And that CowNet system uses primary cells, and it does not require externally added growth factors to culture cells. And
a little bit more about like how is that kind of closed, like self-sufficient system that you've created, and how is it different from what others are using?
Yeah, so in CowNet system, actually probably it's better to start with the cell culture in general, because to do cell culture you need basal medium and serum and growth factors. And the basal medium is not that expensive. It's basically sugar, amino acids, and those materials that you can buy in like 25 kilogram bags. But those serum or growth factors or those hormones are the most expensive ones. But if you look at cow body or animal body or like any fish body or your own body, cells multiply every day, but you don't go to pharmacy to buy those very expensive hormones and inject it into your body for your body cells to grow. And the reason why we don't have to do that is that our body organs like liver or pancreas, those organs make the growth factors for body cell growth. So what we do is we basically do the same thing in a bioreactor system. So we have the CowNet system has got multiple bioreactors, mainly divided into feeder bioreactors, which contains liver cells, pancreatic cells, and other organ cells, and the target cell bioreactor, which contains probably meat cells. And those bioreactors are all connected, and culture medium circulates through the whole system, like how blood circulates through all organs and body. And it's producing, and the system as a whole is producing growth factors inside the system.
Yeah, so from what I understand, it took me a long time to kind of grasp that idea. So maybe the audience are actually all kind of following. Let me just like put it in layman terms. I think what you're trying to recreate is like how naturally our body would actually grow the cells, right? So you actually have organs like the liver creating growth factors naturally. So these are not kind of, hormone or steroid or whatever. It's like growth factors that are natural, and then you create that whole system where it would create the growth factors, and it flows into it within the same system, the growing of the cells. So is that sort of a more effective way to also like cultivate the whole growth of cells, do you think?
Well, obviously there are different methods being attempted, and we are doing one of the possibilities.
Okay, we are getting a lot of questions in the chat box. I just want to reiterate that please try to direct message to GFI Viola if you want your questions to be picked up. We will select a few. Yeah, Viola here. I will pick up a few, and then we'll go into the Q&A session, and we'll pick a few to answer those, like many like very specific questions already. So I will move on to, I think we'll continue dealing with that in the Q&A session. I want to move on and share my screen again and look at the whole staging of Yuki's vision. So again, I'm a big fan of Yuki's your work, and I think the unique way that you are actually approaching cell ag, which I hope it is now clear to all of you, your vision is huge, right? It's taking us all the way through to Mars. And I think the way that you are approaching it has a lot to do with how your journey started. And I don't think that story has been told enough. And not a lot of people actually know that IntegriCulture is a spin-off of a part of a much bigger plans, and it started with Shojin Meat Project. Can you tell us more about that?
Yeah. So originally I started Shojin Meat Project and as a hobbyist club or citizen science club. That is because it was easy. It was easy to start that way, and also that was pretty much the only option I had. With no actual money or like resources in hand. So I launched the Shojin Meat Project, and I had some idea pitches around in some science communities and clubs, and I found then the team sort of grew from initial 3 to 5 to about 15 people, and by that time, and around that time, we started doing from things that we can already do with limited resources, like DIY bio experiments, such as like making synthesizing culture medium at home. And I did that in my bathroom, out of some yeast residue and stuff like that. And there I was sort of, as I learned about the subject of cell cultured meat, what I found is that it has been demonstrated in 2013 by Professor Mark Post, but it has been very, very expensive, and making this cheap is the key. Then I also found there are some like preceding attempts on cell cultured meat about trying to make it big, or using some cheaper method, or many other attempts. But then I thought about, so it's probably better to develop a technology to do this R&D cheap rather than existing expensive method. So we took the approach of not starting with expensive and making it cheap, but start with very, very cheap and make it better.
Yeah. That is super amazing, because everybody's talking about cost being a huge barrier in cellular agriculture, and you started with like the nature of how you started your journey, right? It's super fascinating. Like last time when I was in Tokyo, thank you, Yuki, for inviting me to one of the Shojin Meat meeting. It was awesome. It was just a bunch of youngish people. Maybe I was the oldest one there, reading manga together. Pretty much, I think most of the people there had hands-on experience creating a DIY bioreactor at their home, using your DIY menu to either make medium or actually, grow cells. And I think like that beginning is like, it's also say a lot about like your future direction, like why you're so focused on kind of lowering the cost and basically collaboration and really taking this to like a household level, like something that everybody can do. So we will talk a little bit more about that. I want to kind of move on to talk about your business within IntegriCulture, because your business model is also quite different. We've talked about this before, that Yuki, you see yourself as building an infrastructure business, and you said that others can focus on growing the meat. You can take care of the bioreactors, and you're going to license your tech, like the CONET system, out, basically to get everybody up to speed quicker. Can you tell us a little bit more about? So let's talk about the CONET pipeline first, and then we'll talk about the CONET consortium as well.
Yeah. Well, yeah, so we are not taking this biotechnology to household, but we started from household. Yeah. And so our vision has always been making this a thing for everybody. And IntegriCulture companies' business models also based on that principle. And then we thought about but the thing we have to develop is big, like whole set of meat production facility, which may be as complex as petrochemical complexes on the coastlines. Then so collaboration was quite obvious that collaboration is necessary. So we came to this business models of CONET. One is CONET pipeline, and the other is CONET consortium. And both combined, we call it UniCONET. For this CONET consortium, it is designed for anyone who wants to culture cells. So that anyone could be big food companies or could be local farmers or like restaurants. And although step 2 and 3 are still under development and things to be done in the future, but we can start from 0 and 1. And Ham and Shiok meets on these schemes.
Yeah,
so that they can.
Ham and Shiok meets have already signed up for this partnership, like going through from station 0.
Yeah. So in the future, what they could do as an option is using our system to either get the final product, or they could use it to get the growth medium.
Awesome. You want to move on to talk about the consortium?
Yeah. So that CONET pipeline was about using the CONET system that is still under development, and CONET consortium is about developing the CONET system itself, and has got five sections. One, so from cell source, standardized culture medium, hardware, and product processing, and to this CONET consortium, there are already more than 10 companies sort of signed up and also in conversation, and there are some beer companies involved in standardized culture medium. It kind of links to how we started. We're using like yeast as the cheap culture medium in my bathroom. And also this product processing, some food companies are signed up for that. And CONET hardware and bioreactor, these are for manufacturing companies for building bioreactor systems. And cell source, and that is where farmers are involved, that provides their original cells.
Okay, so I am conscious that there are a lot of questions people are sending in, so I'm trying to leave more time for Q&A. But before we move on to the Q&A session, let's talk about, go back to your bigger vision.
Yeah.
We are calling this session Farm to Table Beyond Your Wildest Imagination because of a conversation that we had, that one day you envisioned that a chef can actually be growing the meat in the restaurant kitchen and then serving it. Like that to me is a mind-blowing, like a complete reimagination of farm to table. And so that is super, super awesome. And you always talk about leaving no one behind. And you thought about like, where does the existing industry go? Where does the workforce go in this new system that we're gradually moving forward to? And you talk about DIY being like a very important concept. And so let's talk a little bit about that. I'm just putting this picture here because I really love the cow. So this is how farm may look like in the future, right?
Yeah. So the idea here is that so we don't it's not necessarily preserve the existing industry, but what's more important is preserving the existing people. And this leave no one behind sounds like kind of like an idealistic rhetoric or something, but it actually has got practical importance, because if you leave someone behind, that group will probably become will be alienated, antagonized, and they will start. They can easily start scare campaigns and like anti-cellular agriculture lobbying activities, and that could easily make the whole rulemaking into political deadlock. And as far as I can see, that's already sort of happening in some countries. And this leaving no one behind is actually quite. I think it's quite crucial in making this cellular agriculture a proper thing. And in that previous picture, that's basically that previous picture on the farmland, and that's one of the possibilities that what farmers could do in the future. So they will be they would have fewer cows, and they could install bioreactors in the backyard, and they will be selling meat than cow. And the unit price of meat is actually something like $70 per kilogram, but the unit price of cow is about 15. So it's actually 4 to 5 times more efficient to sell meat than cow. And at the same time, the farmers could even license the sales than actually selling the cow and end with it.
Yeah, I love that when I saw your previous presentation on the concept of going forward, they sell the meat, which is actually the end product that they're trying to sell, right? Instead of selling the animal, and the price difference there, and why it makes a lot of sense to actually move to selling the meat instead of selling the animal. You have here, everyone, you can double click on this and make it look make it bigger. Business models of meat in the cell-like era.
Yeah. So if you can do things like licensing cell or selling meat than cow, then we can actually think of different sort of business models. And probably the easiest one is cellular agriculture firms, which is basically new farmer selling meat to people. But there are all sorts of other models possible, such as like fabless farmers. So basically, these are farmers without actual farmland, or actual owned farmland. So it could be city dwellers. They just purchase the cow and lend the cow to contract farmer, and they do the rest. Or it could be like cell licensing, that farmers send cells to cell bank and basically cell licensing. Or it could be some shared recipe where like meat enthusiasts come up with novel cell culture protocols for some tasty cell-based meat and share the recipe. And farmers provide the cells for that, and people just download the cell culture recipe and basically grow it at home.
And that's sort of what you've been doing with your DIY manuals, right? Like when you say that, downloading that menu and like following the instructions to do it at home.
And that's one, but this DIY thing can go for all four of these business models, because farmers, because by having some DIY methods, that means farmers and like the street restaurant chefs can also try.
Yeah, I'm going to end, like before we go on to Q&A session, can you tell us about like this picture? This is an urban cell-like farmscape.
Yeah, so that is like one possible scenery of like heavily urbanized farmland based on one of the business models in the previous slide. So you see this small farm on something like 150th floor of a skyscraper in the middle of a city, and that's where cells are being extracted without killing the animal. And cell culture meat is being either produced there or shipped to somewhere.
And then lastly.
And that is when all these things is pushed to the extreme. So some sort of a solar punk scenery where like cellular agriculture has become something like cooking, cell culture, fermentation, cooking. They all come into like similar scale, and people just doing it at home or at a community scale if they want more higher efficiency, and all sorts of other like sci-fi like not random visions. It's kind of like, because I thought it's cool, I put it that way, but has got principles of the so-called democratized cellular agriculture.
I've not heard kind of other people talk about democratizing cell life, and I think that is so central to your whole vision. It's about democratizing this, and that's why I hope that the audience appreciate this as well. Like you are extremely open to sharing your journey, what you're doing, all the discovery that you've made. Like it's a platform for people to all plug in and do their thing and make this go faster and bigger. I'm just wondering, like, what was your inspiration? Like, how did this all start?
Well, how I came to this, I don't really know, but I think there are two factors there. One is my like sci-fi dream from childhood, and the other is all the manga and anime community where people share their works and build on top of each other. And even the original author publishing companies are quite open to that. And here, what I mean by democratized is not just everyone doing it, but it's more like what to do. Those initiatives of what to do is also in people's hands. So it's not like one big company providing everything to people, but it's more like people coming up with their own recipe, or even what we should, or even some regulatory initiatives on what we should and should not do with cellular agriculture. So here I'm talking more about not consumer acceptance of cultured meat, but it's more about like public acceptance of cultured meat. It's not just a business relation between the manufacturer and the consumers.
Yeah. Well, on that note, we will move on to the Q&A session. So we have a lot of questions here. Apologies, we can't get through all of them, but we have picked a few that hopefully would answer a lot of these questions out there. So first of all, we have a question from the audience. Apart from culture medium, what are the other key bottlenecks that you see for cultivated meat to become a mass market product?
So bottlenecks in culture medium. Well, also culture medium is only a part of the whole meat production process, and some companies try to come up with complete culture medium to grow meat, but there are different approaches. And for our approach, we are trying to make the cheapest possible commodity scale crude food grade culture medium, and do all the growth factors and all the thing in the bioreactor system. So in our specific case, the bottleneck for the culture medium is that no one really has tried crude food culture medium, because everything known so far has been based on chemically defined biopharma grade culture medium.
Yeah, I'm going to move on to ask the question about scaling up bioreactors. Can you discuss how one can scale up bioreactors to meet cell life at an industrial scale, and what scale of production is required for these cell-based meat companies to achieve cost parity?
Yeah, so this cost parity is a quite important concept, because the unit price of meat is actually hugely varied. It could be like $3 per kilogram, like chicken made in chicken in Brazil, or it could be like $60 per kilogram, like foie gras. So you have to make the careful choice of the products to produce using cellular agriculture. And one of the most expensive ones is foie gras, and that's what IntegriCulture companies trying to commercialize at first. And we are planning to do that in 2021 December using 100 to 200 liter bioreactor and mixing the cultured fat accumulated duck liver cells with plant-based materials and making into a paste. So that's the first product first food product for IntegriCulture company. And that food product is important because it could be non-food product made by cellular agriculture. And cosmetics made from cell culture is launching earlier than that in April next year.
Yeah. So that's super interesting. That's about kind of how you stage the product launch, right? Because as you said very rightly, Yuki, like you wouldn't go for like a really cheap product. Like it doesn't make sense. You go into the market with something that is premium, with something like flour where there is a very obvious reason, like why, because of the animal cruelty that goes into it. If you want the product without the animal cruelty, basically like you need to go for the cell-like version of it. So it has like that extra, reason why people need to choose that. And of course, it is a premium product. So from a, staging your product launch perspective, that make a lot of sense. I think just to follow up on that question, like from a kind of bigger industry perspective, like how do you think about kind of scaling up bioreactors, as you do these more niche product launch, but then growing into like really growing meat, piece of steak, meat or whatever, at an industrial scale. How are you thinking about the journey or how do you scale up to that level?
So starting with foie gras is only because we don't have the technology to do it in large scale and make it cheap yet. So it's a business decision, not out of like profit seeking, but more like technological incompetence in a way. So that's where we have to think about the scaling up. And for scaling up, at least we know that we can go up to 8,000 liters for animal cell culture, because there are bioreactors doing that in biopharma industry. But at the same time, we are also seeing that like probably 200-ton bioreactor is not impossible, because there's beer fermenters already there. But the scale up technology will be a very, I would say, it's not going to be there's not going to be a silver bullet, but it will be years of iterative and cumulative small innovations. And I think that's something that even existing big heavy engineering companies could do better. So that's why I think collaboration is pretty important. And one of the main reasons for the Culnet Consortium is to do that scale up in a collaborative manner, because no single companies can do that overnight. Yeah. At the end, what we are trying to build is something like petrochemical complexes on coastlines.
Yeah, of that scale, and that's why collaboration and that consortium, like everything that you're doing is thinking. Because you need partners, right? You need a lot more money, talents to come into this, to scale it up together. It's not a one person or one company job at all. I'm going to go on and ask about so many questions here. I think something that Yuki, you have a very particular, unique insider understanding, I guess. Talking with partners, etc. When do you think cultivated meat can actually become a mass market product? We've heard a lot of people kind of predicting, giving you a number of years and then missing the mark again. Like, whether it's IntegriCulture or sort of really the whole market, like, when do you think we should see this as a mass market product?
The definition of the mass market thing is a bit of a tricky thing, but from IntegriCulture company point of view, to be honest, we don't have any timelines for that. And the reason is because we are not selling the final consumer product, but the cell culture system. And using the cell culture system, the clients may be interested in producing non-food products, such as like pharmaceuticals or cosmetics. And an IntegriCulture company is totally okay with that.
Yeah.
And when our technology matures to a level where like supermarket beef is financially feasible, then we are very happy to do that, or that's actually one of our goals. But we don't have to stick to that on any timeline, because we could always be doing like non-food products and other like higher unit price things.
Yeah, I love that sort of really integrated way of thinking about it, and that's why audience might have noticed sort of in this summit as well, we definitely try to talk to more like kind of B2B companies rather than just B2C companies. So not just doing one hero product and trying to get this out of market by a certain year. Like what Yuki and a lot of other speakers like in this summer, what you're doing is building a whole ecosystem, building the whole support system, all the infrastructure, etc., that will accelerate everyone basically. And that's super important. And I think at this point in time, the sector really needs to think about it this way. So I guess ending it with like a lot of people have sort of consumer perception questions. So let's try and address that as well. I want to dive a little bit deeper into. So first of all, Yuki, like, do you think the kind of public perception of cultivated meat or cellular agriculture in Japan or in Asia in general, how does that compare with the West? I also want you to kind of explain a little bit more about the reason, like your CONET system, right? How can it potentially address some of the consumers' concerns about cellular agriculture?
Yeah, so when talking about consumer acceptance, there's one thing we always have to keep in mind. That is what people say and what people actually do is very, very different. And although in many different research consumer surveys, there's like 1/3 yes, 1/3 no, don't know, and 1/3 no. We never know until the market's out there and people, and then where we ask, did you buy cell cultured meat product?
Yeah.
And with that in mind, in case of Japan and China, that's also because of how the language works there. In English, the cultured meat or cultivated meat or whatever, if you don't know the meaning, you don't know it.
Yeah.
But in case of Chinese or Japanese, you can pick the meaning from the characters or kanji there, and people know what it's like. So at least in case of Japan, the problem of consumer perception on cultured meat is not like people not knowing it, but more like people misunderstanding it. Yeah, and that's especially true because a lot of people know about cultured meat. At least in Japan, a lot of people know about cultured meat from the various science fiction manga, and in those science fiction manga, the cultured meat is drawn like some sentinel being coming out of the culture vat or something like that.
That's so awesome. So can you explain a bit to us, especially maybe audience that are not from Asia, like a direct, because I think terminology is so important. That's why, right? Like you call a name, and then the perception kind of builds from that. So what is like a direct translation to English of what cultured meat is called in Japanese?
Yeah, I think, and so I know that there's a lot of like nomenclature thing going on in English-speaking world, but I think in Japan it's not gonna happen. The existing terminology will be used. Yeah,
what is the direct translation of that?
Direct translation of that, yeah, cultured meat.
It's the cultured meat, right?
Yeah, direct translation of cultured meat, and that will probably be used. So if you we could come up with new words like the direct translation of so-called like cultivated meat in Japanese, but it's very unlikely that people will be using that term.
I guess culture meat is at least better than lab-grown meat, right? If you're stuck with lab-grown meat, I think that is even worse from getting the public. Yeah.
And I think there was the last question of how the counted system speaks with the consumer acceptance thing. And one of the features of the counted system is that it's not using cell lines or growth factors. So these things are also quite a big thing from consumer point of view, because cell lines, consumers could call that cancer cells, and growth factors, they could call it hormones. And obviously, people wouldn't like the idea of eating the cancer cells proliferated by hormones.
Yeah, I love that you have thought about that, and I don't know which one came first. Like, was it the science? Was it thinking that this is going to work better with the regulation, or thinking this is going to work better with consumer perception? But that you have kind of using this system, you address these two big concerns that consumers may have.
Yeah, it was actually science came first.
Okay.
And even before science, our limited economic capability came first, because like genetic engineering or growth factors, we can't use any of those expensive stuff, especially in household level.
That just worked out really, really well at the end then. Like it started with the cost constraint, but like you end up with the system, working around that cost constraint. Now you have a system that can be utilized by many other startups, many other companies, or even just individuals as well. Okay, I think we are over time now. I just want to thank you so much, Yuki. I think from the chat post we can see that people are just super enjoying this session, and I've always learned a lot from talking to Yuki. Someone is mentioning that in Doraemon that was culture meat there. Yeah, we need to go get that episode and do a screen cap of that. That would be super, super fun. So thank you so much again, Yuki, for just genuinely sharing everything with the audience. So thank you very much